Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this workshop on GNSS, or brought to you this evening by Astral Aviation Consulting on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. If you want to stay in the loop with events and resources, please sign up to our mailing list. And you could do this by going to our website, which Sophie's just dropped in the chat box for a link. And you'll get a replay of this workshop with your sign up as well. But there's lots of other replays from other webinars and events that we've done on that website as well. So please do have a look and make use of that. My name's Matt Lane. Those of you that have not been to one of these or met me before, I'm a head of training and active single and multi FI and examiner and flight instructor course instructor. And as per some previous webinars, I'm delighted to be joined by Nigel, Wilson and Charlotte. I'll let them say hello. So Charlotte, hello, and let you introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlotte Dadswell. I've been flying for 20 years, instructing for 15, and I'm a full-time flying instructor and head of training.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. And Nigel, great to have you with us again. Say hello.
Yeah. Here we go. Nigel Wilson. I'm head of training for a DTO and an ATO, instructor, examiner, display pilot. You name it, we seem to be able to do it. And you might know me from Easy PPL as well. There you go.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nigel, as well. Next hour and a bit, we're going to break this workshop down into some easily digestible chunks, and we're going to cover some moving map devices and pre-flight planning, some preparation and contingencies, in-flight use, bit of threat and error management, some thoughts around that, and then at the end, we're going to talk about the new changes since the 1st of October to the PPL syllabus and some thoughts from us on how we can integrate GNSS usage and exploitation into the PPL syllabus. There is going to be opportunity at the end for Q&A, but as you've probably seen, we will try and take questions as we go along. And I will try and pull some of these up after each section where it's relevant. Some of the questions, if I'm ignoring your question, don't worry about that. It's because maybe we come into it later on in the webinar. Please use the Q&A box because it's easier for us to manage that way as well. You should be able to also exploit the chat box to interact with us on the chat box there as well. We'll keep an eye on that as we go through. What I'd like to do to kick us off, though, is a poll. Now, just a reminder. So somebody's saying the chat is disabled, so we'll pick that up. Thank you on there as well. Sophie, I'll let you sort that, please, that the chat is disabled. So we've tested all of this, but Zoom has obviously thrown us another curveball. Sophie will work on that as we go through. Thank you for letting us know in the Q&A there as well. Now, polls. So you'll be able to interact with the polls if you're watching us live. You'll see it come up. Those of you that are watching on a replay, you won't be able to interact, but please test yourself. Just a reminder, we don't record who says what. We don't record any answers. We don't know who said what. The polls are just a bit of interaction and gives us some data and information as we go through to add to the webinar. So for the first one, just what do people mainly fly? That should have popped up on your screen now. And have a look at what choices are there. We know lots of people fly different types, but let us know what people mainly fly. And let's have a look at the results, please. So a lot of single engine piston. Great to have some of the microlight and glider and TMG community with us. And some of our gyrocopter and helicopter friends with us this evening as well. Brilliant. Great to have you all with us tonight. So it's great that we've got a real spread of the community here there as well. Yeah, somebody said, what about single engined electric? Yeah, since that's another difference, we shall pick that up. Thank you, Al, I think that's mentioned that as well. So yeah, there's so many differences in that current single engine electric. We shall add that. It'd be interesting to see if we've got any of the pilots from that community joining us as well. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the first bit of this presentation, which is going to be delivered by Charlotte. So over to you, Charlotte, to talk about a bit of pre-flight planning and that.
Okay, so before we get into the detail on this section, let's start with a quick poll. So here we go. NOTAM information obtained from moving map devices satisfies the pilot's obligation to obtain this information. True or false? So just give you a moment or two to pick your answer. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers and see what we've got. Okay, the correct answer was B, false. So well done. Looks like most of you got that. Yeah, moving maps can be a great help with the visual presentation of this information, but should be checked against the official sources of NOTAM information from the NATS website. So anytime we've got software between us and that official source, it's just being a little bit careful. There's possibility of errors. Okay, so moving on. So moving map devices, there are types of moving map devices we can look at. So they fall roughly into two main types: panel mounted devices installed into the aircraft or portable devices. The latter can be a dedicated piece of hardware like the Pilot 3 shown in the slide there bottom left, or aviation navigation apps running on a tablet or a mobile phone. Either way, what we're going to talk about tonight is applicable to anything we might class as a moving map, be it a Garmin 1000, and here we're talking about the MFD or multifunction display, which displays a moving map, or if it's an app that runs on your tablet or phone, such as SkyDemon, 4Flight, etc. Tonight we're probably going to focus more on portable moving map devices that run as an app on a tablet, but all of the concepts and best practices we'll mention will be applicable to all moving map devices. Okay, so now we need to think about choosing which one to use. So remember, we'll not only be using it for flight planning at the comfort of a desk, but also in flight. As such, size of device needs to be carefully considered. Mustn't be too small, so it's hard to see or requires too much concentration in flight. Mustn't be too large, so the mounting device interferes with lookout from the cockpit or a clear view of the aircraft instruments. Nor must it be mounted in such a way that it affects full and free movement of our flying controls. So the choice of device and the placement is therefore very dependent on what you'll be flying, so it needs a bit of thought. Specifically for apps that run on tablets or phones, we need to consider some other things. So GNSS capability is one of these. Be careful, some devices that only have Wi-Fi may not have the capability to receive those GNSS signals. That means we'll need to connect a device like this to something that can receive those signals, such as a standalone receiver like a Garmin Globe. Another useful aspect of a portable moving map device is audible alerting capability to the pilot. We'll cover this a bit more later on, but an appropriate way for the pilot to receive the audio from the moving map device is a must, such as Bluetooth capability available in many modern headsets. So for pre-flight planning, firstly, we need to make sure we've got the charts installed for the country or region we'll be flying in, and that the software and databases are all up to date. There may be a choice of chart styles, so it's worth spending a little bit of time working out what suits you in terms of presentation. There will be options to show or hide various features to declutter, but it's probably best to start with everything switched on at this stage while you learn your way around the system, plan a route, make sure you don't inadvertently hide something important. You'll often find settings for the planning and the in-flight or navigation phases separately. There's a huge amount of scope for personalising these settings on some devices, such as the type of airspace warnings we want, obstacle clearances, and personal weather minima. But as with the declutter, initially it's probably wise to start off with the default settings and everything switched on. Once we've planned our route, we may decide to look at decluttering on the in-flight options to assist with clarity for use in the air. But it's important to understand exactly what is and is not shown and how to adjust this, particularly if we need to change our plan or divert in flight. One great advantage of some moving maps is the visual representation of NOTAMs, as mentioned earlier. Makes it very easier to see the areas affected by various activity and adjust the plan accordingly. As we saw in the poll earlier, remember to check these against the official sources. Many devices will also generate a plog for you from the route you plan, and again, there'll usually be some options as to which columns you want to see on the plog, so you can set it up and suit your personal preferences. This plog can then be printed to use and complete in flight as a backup to the use of your moving map. So coming on to route planning, drawing your route should be easy and you can adjust it until you're happy. There's different ways of defining waypoints on different devices. Things like SkyDim shown here. It's often easy to snap it to large features, but you can also fine-tune to any other points of your choice. It might be useful to switch to a satellite imagery view if available and help you locate a nice specific waypoint, which may not be shown clearly on the chart. Also, we mustn't forget vertical navigation. It's easy to see the horizontal route on the chart, but vertical navigation is equally important in terms of safe altitudes and airspace avoidance. Once we're happy with the horizontal route, we can adjust the planned altitude of each leg, either by editing the details of the leg on the map or dragging it up and down on the vertical profile view as shown at the bottom there. While it's tempting to route close to airspace, for example, on the assumption that we'll have accurate position information, it's always good practice to consider the take two advice, i.e. planning to avoid airspace by 2 nautical miles horizontally and or 200 feet vertically. It's wise to allow more margin where possible, especially on a turbulent or thermic day where it may be more challenging to maintain altitude accurately, especially during periods of high workload. You should also allow for the possibility of losing your GNSS information at any point, so give yourself more room and take the pressure off. Having planned your route, many devices will also allow weather information to be displayed, which could be useful as part of your planning and decision-making before flight. You should also ensure that your device is prepared for flight, adequately charged, that you've got charging facility available in the aircraft if needed in flight, and that it's positioned safely and appropriately in the aircraft.
Right. Thanks very much, Charlotte. Coming up next, we've got a bit of in-flight use with Nigel there as well. Now, we knew that the chat would explode when we said about official sources and NOTAM information and all the rest of it there as well. So, Nigel, do you want to make some comments? We discussed this in the preamble for this meeting, didn't we? So, yeah,
we can. So yes, most moving map, official source moving map devices, yes, they do use official sources of NOTAM. In other words, for example, somebody's mentioned SkyDemon. We know that goes to the it's actually European database, but it's NATS database. However, the CAA's view is you are still having a piece of software interpret the data from NATS before it gets presented to you. And historically, some movie maps have had a problem that has actually caused pilots an issue with how certain pieces of information has been presented or not on the screen. So the official stance from the CAA is, and from NATS in fact, is that you should still go to the official source, in other words, the NATS website, to look at the NOTAM information directly without this piece of software getting in between you and the data. So that's the official line.
Okay, so there you have it. That's the official line, and we check this in the run-up to this as well. However, you're the people out in industry, you're the people out there flying there as well. So please, we're going to put the email addresses up as well. Please challenge us. Please come back to this on this. We can collate this. We can collate feelings. We can collate trends. We can create questions from industry, from the pilots out there. And we're really, really happy to, engage with the regulator, with the CAA on this as well. So yeah, please do come back to us. What we're giving you is the line on this as well. Couple of questions as well about take two and how it may not be appropriate or may not be very easy to do that in certain parts of the UK, and that I think that's well recognised there as well. I think it's not mandated. It's guidance. It's a recommendation. It's a planning consideration. But I recognise it in certain parts, certain routings, especially going around the north of the Heathrow zone or whatever. It is very difficult to plan or fly with take two as well. So yeah, we recognise that, but it is just it's a recommendation. It's kind of good practice. We recognise it's not a mandated there as well. Okay, Nigel, let's move on and have a chat about some preparations and contingencies. There's also a few questions about how is this related to GNSS. What we're covering here is the whole use of GNSS capabilities, use of moving maps related to the 1st of October syllabus introduction. So that's why we're introducing that as the planning and the in-flight usage of GNSS moving maps and all of the capabilities and the threat and error management around that. That's what why we've introduced that, if anybody's wondering. Thanks. Nigel, over to yourself.
No problem. So we're going to have a look at just a bit about preparation and contingency. So there was already someone made a comment I saw about don't rely on out-of-the-box settings on anything that uses these types of devices, because they might not be the best practice, and indeed they aren't. Okay, so just be aware of that. Make sure you know what your devices can do before you start using it. So we need to think about some contingencies. So preloaded information, although we've said that the configuration of the device is highly important, how do we know that someone else hasn't, for example, altered your minimum safe altitude criteria or turned off all of the airspace alerts and warnings, especially if it's a shared device? You know, if you're in a group aeroplane situation, you've got one device that belongs to the aircraft, and lots of pilots tend to use it and set their own little preferences. So just be aware about that, because it might receive all the GNSS signals in the world and do everything that you think it's going to do, but the device isn't configured appropriately to your requirements. Overheating, well, that's just the next sort of thing, really, to do with devices. By default, it's sort of a double-edged sword. You usually have to have a device in a position where it is able to see the sky, so to speak, to receive the GNSS signals. And that usually means it's also in sunlight. So, be ready for little devices to get overheated and to shut down. So, it's just things you need to think about where you're going to put it. Maybe you could put it into the airflow of an air vent or something like that. But more importantly, you need to have a backup plan as to what you're going to do if that device fails, or if, heaven forbid, the GNSS system fails and you no longer know where you are. So you need to have a backup plan in place. And we're going to talk more about that, or Matt's going to talk more about that, about mitigation, a bit later on. Other things as the opposite end of the spectrum, in fact, is that you can have a cold environment as well. And of course, a cold environment isn't very conducive to long battery life. So, the same situation could happen where something gets cold and then unexpectedly you lose the facilities of that little system. In-flight updates. So that sort of leads us on nicely into a little bit of in-flight update information. So most of these devices rely on a mobile phone network for data in the respect of if we're going to use it in flight. Of course, there's no guarantees that a mobile network is going to work at altitudes that we're going to be flying. So that means we really do need to ensure that any data that we might need to make use of during the flight, we need to have preloaded before we get into the air by use of either a mobile network or Wi-Fi or something like that. And that's really important, so that we go with up-to-date information. So make sure your device is configured appropriately to get all of that information to allow you to have that in flight as well. Some devices have an option of downloading the whole of the AIP for a country. That's great. Okay, but don't forget it will expire, typically around about the 28 days mark. That's when the AIRAC cycle comes into play, where changes happen every 28 days. And also, that data can be quite large in volume. So, you might be a little bit careful about, to be selective about which country's data you download, and don't download the whole world. Otherwise, you'll be forever downloading information. Little observation really about some of the aeronautical and navigational data. Just be very careful about what you expect those devices to present and warn you of, because it does vary by manufacturer. So I can give you an example. Even in a fixed installation, such as the Garmin range of Garmin 1000, GTN 650s, 750s, I don't know whether anyone's noticed, but the Garmin navigational database simply does not include glider sites. They do not exist on the inbuilt maps or the inbuilt on-screen devices. So just be careful, because you just need to make sure that you know about all of the information and all of the navigational data that you would need to use during that flight. So the next thing then about, just be careful about, we've talked about jamming, right? Well, let's consider what jamming is. Well, jamming is where somebody prevents you from receiving GNS signals, and everyone's going to say, yeah, that's fine, because that's easy, because there's always NOTAMs about areas of where things are jammed. Well, I can tell you a different story about that. Very, very briefly, you probably know the flying reporter. I was doing some training with him over Cambridge, and all of a sudden we lost all GNSS signals on 2 independent devices in the cockpit. And to cut a long story short, it wasn't NOTAMed or anything. Basically, it boiled down to a gang, a fairly intelligent gang of car thieves had stored a lot of high-value cars in a warehouse very close to the airfield. And to make sure that the authorities didn't use any tracking devices attached to those cars to work out where the location was, they used quite a sophisticated GPS jamming device to jam GPS signals, which of course they didn't bargain on also being done for endangering aircraft as well as stealing cars, because that's actually what happened, where everybody in the vicinity of Cambridge just lost GPS and GNSS signals full stop. So, common effects then, well, we've learned firsthand, loss of position, well, you're not going to get that. You can have all sorts of warnings on the system. Sometimes the plane goes red if you're on a portable device. Navigation can freeze or become erratic. You might have equipment that predicts trajectories of incoming traffic and stuff based on your position and speed, which is from GNSS signals. That isn't going to happen either. So just be careful. So always have a contingency in your pre-flight planning about what you would do if you lose navigational data. Okay, so yes, you can have an alternative chart. Yes, you can have an alternative nav plug, but you need to be able to keep that up to date while you're flying, and not try to pick up the pieces, if it happens when you haven't been doing that. Okay, so I suppose you want to mention spoofing.
Yeah, you picked up on it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so spoofing is slightly different. Spoofing is where somebody is transmitting erroneous GNSS signals to fool your bit of equipment into thinking it's somewhere other than where it actually is. We tend not to see that in the UK too much, but certainly over in the Eastern Bloc countries, the commercial airliners actually do have a bit of a problem with this. And in fact, I know of one airline that specifically uses one particular route to a destination as a training route, because they know they're going to get spoofed. Okay, and then they show how the airline industry deals with that by going back to inertial nav and DME position fixers. But interestingly, if the destination at the far end has only got an RMP approach, a GNSS approach, they cannot use it. They have to divert to somewhere that's got a conventional navigation aid like an ILS. So that's how they do it. And again, it's just, worth telling the story there about how the professionals, in other words, deal with it and have mitigation measures, and certainly think about it at the pre-planning, pre-departure stages we're talking about here. So it sort of boils down to about contingency planning, where we need to have a plan for when we either lose GNSS capability, whether that be moving map or inbuilt into the cockpit. So we need to be able to cross-check information quite readily, which of course means that we have to be on the ball all of the time. So it's no use just trusting following a magenta line on a screen, not really paying attention as to where you are, because you're on the magenta line and you're in the right direction, you're going to be safe, and then that all disappears and you don't really know where you are. So you really do have to keep carry on navigating, even though we're using GNSS to do that. Okay, so that's my bit done. unless there's any other
Thanks,
questions.
Nigel. Yeah, no, there's some brilliant, quite detailed tech comments in the chat coming in. So there's some real experts out there. So thank you for your input as well. And somebody has just in the Q&A said, yeah, this is another problem with kit that truck drivers may use to try and hide their position. And apparently Burnham, M40 truck stops and North Birmingham are known hotspots for this as well. And the individual mentioning this has had some double GTN 750 failures due to this reason there as well. So interesting. So it is yeah, it's definitely a live issue, I think there as well. So one to think about. Thank you. Yeah, and somebody's said they're aware of at least one airspace infringement. Somebody who followed the magenta line. Yeah, and basically, yeah, they could have actually seen the airfield, but ended up infringing airspace as well. So, it's just about keeping that big picture situational awareness, I think, which is what you're emphasising there, Nigel, isn't it? So, which leads us nicely on to Charlotte's going to do a few slides for us about in-flight use. Over to you, Charlotte.
Okay, so before we start this section, we've got another poll for you. It is a legal requirement to have a paper chart in the cockpit, true or false? So again, we'll just give you a few seconds to pick your answer before we have a look at the answers. Okay, so let's have a look at what everybody said. Oh, fairly even split here. So the correct answer was B, it's false. We are required to carry current and suitable charts, which may be an electronic version. However, with the possibility of technical issues, we should probably carry a backup, and a paper may be a very good way of achieving this. So a lot of people will still carry a paper chart. Okay, in-flight use then. So here we are, having carefully planned our flight on the device and considered the contingencies, we're ready to go flying. So declutter. One big culprit for airspace infringements is the misuse of declutter options on some moving maps. Certainly during planning, we suggested not having any declutter set. The device must show everything, no matter how high. In flight, however, decluttering can be useful, but again, must not be misused. Let's take an example. Some devices allow us to hide airspace at certain levels. For example, all the airspace that is more than 1,000 feet above or below us. We need to be careful here. From a situational awareness point of view, we've just lost a lot of information. If we're going to do this, we need to consider the climb and or descent performance of the aircraft we're flying. Many moving maps devices give us a warning about airspace, such as airspace 200 feet above. If we're going to use declutter, we need to enable the device to give us ample time warning to allow us to see or hear that warning and then do something sensible about it. For example, if the aircraft climbs at 1,000 feet per minute, we don't want to set a declutter option of hide airspace 500 feet above, since although it may show on the screen within about 30 seconds to go, the warning will give a grand total of about 12 seconds when it announces airspace 200 feet above. That's an extreme example, but it gets the point across. We'd recommend using a figure of twice the climb or descent rate of the aircraft as the declutter figure. So in this example, we should set the declutter to only hide airspace 2,000 feet above or below. Zoom's another thing to look at. Moving map devices tend to have this facility. Depending on the device, that sometimes really does zoom in, and as the scale changes, you get some more detail. But on some devices, all it will do is just make the image of the map bigger and more blurry, like the picture we've got on the slide there. Make sure you know what yours does. Zooming in on a suitable device that does give more detail, we can more easily identify how close to controlled airspace laterally we are. But don't forget, the objective isn't to give controllers the heebie-jeebies by flying 10 feet outside of their zone, carefully following the contours around the corners. That's only going to end in disaster for us. Remember, Take 2 is there for a reason. Equally, we can often set the size of our aircraft depicted on the screen. We'd recommend making a suitable scale size, no use having the aircraft wingspan 5 miles wide, obscuring the view and the detail we need to see. This brings us on to best practice as to how to actually use the device in the cockpit. We should still be flying a heading and an altitude as normal and occasionally checking on the moving map that we are on track. Use it just like you would your paper chart, with the added bonus of your position being shown. Check visual features against the position shown and maintain a paper plog so you're ready to revert if the moving map fails for any reason. We mustn't just stare at the magenta line and make irregular heading changes to keep on track with that. We still need to fly accurately and change our headings purposefully to maintain track. It's vital that we keep our eyes outside as much as possible to maintain a good lookout. Remember that if we accurately plan a flight from A to B at an altitude and someone else does the same thing the other way at the same altitude, if we both fly a magenta line accurately, we will meet each other head on. Another thing that some pilots don't have full appreciation of that can get them into trouble is the vertical position. Because of the way GNSS positioning operates, we won't go into the detail here, our vertical position will always be less accurate than our lateral position. So it's really important that we don't rely on the moving map information to establish vertical clearance from any airspace or to fly at a particular altitude or height. The altimeter in the aircraft must always be used with an appropriate pressure setting. For anyone who believes a portable moving map device somehow knows and displays our altitude from communicating with the aircraft or by gathering information from a connected electronic conspicuity device, think again. For those interested in more detail on this, Nigel wrote a piece on this very subject for AOPA a while back. We'll pop a link to this highly informative article in the chat box now and have a read later on.
Thanks, Charlotte. That link is in the chat box there as well. There's probably one question, it might be worth picking up now, Nigel, as well, about GNSS accuracy in the vertical is kind of worse. I don't know whether you want to pick that up now as well.
So, yeah, I mean, we sort of said that, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote that article for AOPA. But there's a big misunderstanding about how accurate the vertical nav is on particularly moving map devices as to where the device gets the information from. And basically, it gets it from GPS, and that is it. And that is not good enough in order to prevent yourself from infringing, or to certainly work along the lines of a good reference for your real altitude. It's a bit technical, but basically, if you think about it, it's the GPS systems the satellites are spaced out to give lateral position fixes quite readily. If we really wanted a good vertical position, we'd actually need to be able to see the satellites the other side of the world, which of course we can't do because the satellite signals don't penetrate the whole width of the Earth, so to speak, the other side. But that's the main reason for the inaccuracies, yeah. And there are mitigations that we can do, which we'll talk about later on, a bit about SBAS and things like that. But that will do for now, I think.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nigel. And actually, there's a comment in the chat as well, but gliding moving map software now to speak to EC devices with a barometric sensor and display barometric attitudes, which is interesting. I wasn't aware of that actually as well, but presumably they're sensing the barometric pressure in the cabin or in the cockpit. So, but it's not something I've come across. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, just be careful with that one, because that's what that article was about a misconception about what EC devices give back to a moving map. So I'll be very happy if it does the way that you're saying it, but I'm a bit skeptical about that.
Brilliant. Thanks. So threat and error management. This is my bit. So yeah, and somebody's just commented there. Gliding pilots been using moving map. I know a lot of the glider community have, especially because of their cockpit management, some of their constraints in space as well, and the distances they can travel. There's some very good background that they've been developing for many years with some of the gliding moving map charts as well. Somebody's also put a link in the chat to a report from the Royal Institute of Navigation talking about jamming and spoofing there as well. So thank you for that. David has put in there. What we'll do is we'll lift that link and make sure that link goes out with our other links in the post-event email. So we'll have a look at that. If that's a good article there, we'll put that in the post, like I say, links as well. So okay. Another quick poll. Navigational information will always be up to date on moving map devices. What do people think about this? True or false? given you a few seconds. Let's have a look at the answers. What have we got? False. Yeah, 93% as well. Of course, yeah, the navigation information is only as good as the updates that you've kept up to date on there as well. And it happens as well. Updates can fail or have problems in some of my other day job things in large aircraft and military aircraft as well. We've come across problems with updates to mapping and navigation information, and the aircraft hasn't taken the information for some reason. It's been discovered airborne, but there's some out-of-date information in there as well. So there's lots of processes and procedures, and everybody has good intent, but it can happen that the update is not there. So that is false. So into threat and error management, and many threats associated with GNSS devices in the cockpit. I'm just going to talk to you about what I think are the top three. And we had a good discussion about this with the team before. So these are the three things that if you're training students or you're thinking about on your refresher flight training, these are three things to think about with GNSS usage. So threat one, data integrity. GPS devices have revolutionized GA navigation. I think we're all accepting that, and certainly the really engaging and the great views that are coming across in the chat. Everybody's really invested in this, and everybody's really taken to this and has got views about it, which is a great thing there as well. But we have to remember the data driving those maps is only as good as its integrity. And what we're talking about with integrity: accuracy, completeness, timeliness. So how trustworthy is that position? How trustworthy is that terrain or airspace information at any given moment? So just always be mindful of what's the data integrity of the information that's driving or displaying on my moving map. So is the software or data code? Know where your data comes from. So your device might use a database, Jefferson, Garmin, lots of other commercial providers, but not all updates are equally detailed. So we've really got to check the database validity dates, and we've got to ensure that navigation and obstacle data are current before flight there as well. And under current UK legislation, there are actually no regulatory requirements in place for third-party providers that redistribute or repackage aeronautical information from the UK AIP. So they're not regulated, these other providers there as well. So you've got to make a decision yourself whether the product is giving you what you need. Is it giving you all of the information that you think it's giving you there as well? Different products, different versions, different updates may give you more or less information. So it's just, we're not saying don't trust it. What we're saying is just understand what it is and what it isn't giving you as well. Recently there was a commercial provider of a particular app that decided to stop supporting that application. So some people out there may still be using that application, may still be using that mapping, but it's now an unsupported product. The manufacturer's not doing any updates to that product. It's not doing any testing. It's not doing any resolution of issues out there as well. But people may well still be using that product out there as well. But again, the integrity is unknown because it's an unsupported product now, and the manufacturer came out and said as much. We've also talked about GPS signal integrity, and a strong GPS signal doesn't always mean reliable navigation. So we're going to touch on integrity warnings and loss of signal. Nigel's already touched on some of the reasons where you may have problems with that signal because of jamming. Here's an example of a potentially rogue situation here as well. So this aircraft, I took this photo, or somebody else was flying, so I was safe to take photos. And the aircraft GPS position seemed to lag. So we flew a little test with approval of air traffic as well. We said we were going to fly towards the Brise zone. This is here. And we confirmed that we were inside the zone with some ground features that we know to be on the edge of the zone. And air traffic confirmed that we were actually inside the zone on their radar screen as well. You can see that the aircraft is still shown outside of the zone. Okay, so there's a problem here with this particular aircraft. Now, we don't know whether it was the GPS signal it was receiving, whether it was the update rate on the moving map, or some kind of signal lag between the aircraft. So the aircraft was put unserviceable and the engineers investigated it. But this is a real, I haven't made this up. This is a real life. We were well inside the Bryce zone at the time I took that photograph with the aircraft showing outside of it there as well. So there we go. Yeah, and I think some people have just put in some links to there to what one of the products that I was mentioning was discontinued there as well. Now, RAIM, Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring. We could do a whole lecture and masterclass on this as well, but it'll probably get me well outside my personal envelope with some of the technical situation. But RAIM technology was developed to allow aircraft GPSs to assess the integrity of the GPS signal they receive. There's two types of RAIM technology. There's RAIM fault detection, that detects system errors. So when you've got more than 4 satellites available, which is the minimum needed to produce a 3D position fix, the extra ranges of the extra satellites should all be consistent. So, any kind of differences in there as well, the system picks up there could be a system error and it alerts that the systems are unreliable. And that's a very, very quick top level counter over that as well. More modern receivers also incorporate fault detection and exclusion, which allows them to continue to operate in the event of a erroneous GPS signal. So in that case, what's happened is rather than just saying it's unreliable, the system will figure out which one is unreliable and it decides to basically kind of ignore it and allows the continued operation there as well. But I'd say I'm not going to go into it in a lot of depth, but basically the more satellites you have, the better the quality that you're going to get. So you've got to have at least 1 extra satellite available for fault detection. So you've got to have at least 5. And if you get in onto fault detection and exclusion, that more developed, you've got to have at least 6 available as well, okay, to allow a single corrupted satellite to be excluded as well. So you can see how more satellites, better kit starts to give you better thing. Now, there's also RAIM prediction there as well. That's when you start to get into RMP approaches and that. And again, we could do a whole of a lecture on this as well. You can get a prediction from the Augur website. Somebody's already beat me to it and put a link in the chat box there, and we'll be putting the link as a slightly shorter one there as well, if that works as well. So you can carry out up to 3 days in advance. Some systems like the Garmin 1000, put a screenshot there, also offer RAIM availability prediction for use in the aircraft there as well. But you can do it on the internet, and it's worth having a look at there as well. So we're not going to go into RMP and PBN ops there as well. But if you've got quite an old system that you're planning on flying RMP approaches on without continuous monitoring, and that you may or should be doing a RAIM check before flight over the internet if you're going to make approaches somewhere. But like I say, we don't have the time to go into full RMP. But basically, the more modern kit has better fault monitoring and prediction there as well. Great. Right, device position as well. We'll just touch on this as well. This is another threat there as well. And this information here is in some of the CAA safety sense leaflets on using VFR moving maps. Also, some of this is produced in the Skyway code as well. If you're training students or you're refreshing yourself or coming back to light aircraft flying from some time away, there's some really good information, advice and graphics on this as well, which I commend to you there as well. And human factors as well. We've touched on many of these as well, but there's just a couple I'd like to just, you know, recover there as well. Heads in time. What I mean by heads in time is degrading your lookout, getting down, looking at the device as well. This is a real threat, but as humans, you know, we really have to work really hard to avoid getting drawn into the device, especially if it's on our lap or mounted low down as well. Number of times I've said, you know, actually, you know, when I'm testing or training, I'm not going to go heads down. I'm going to maintain the lookout. But even then, I find myself get that spidey sense. I haven't looked out properly because I've got drawn into the kit as well. One of the aircraft to fly as an RAF reservist had a whole new range of nav kit in, and everybody reported that we were getting drawn into playing around and looking at the device. You know, we talked about we weren't going to do this. We flew as instructors together to get used to the kit before we started training students on it. But even then, we all found ourselves getting drawn into heads down as well. Over-reliance, Nigel and Charlotte have really touched on there as well. And the last two I'd like to do is touch on there. It's kind of related to the over-reliance, but a lot of the devices that we're getting now as well can also display traffic information as well. Brilliant, excellent aid to situational awareness if used appropriately. But again, it comes back to understanding what information and what integrity that it's giving to you, because not all the traffic information is displayed. And we've covered this in a lot of our previous workshops there as well. So if on your moving map, you're also getting overlaid traffic information, don't get drawn into staring at it, fly defensively, and you know, understand what information it is and what information it's not giving you there as well. If you can, use audio cues and audio alerts to try and reduce that heads down information time on your device as well. Okay, you can Bluetooth the headset, you can aircraft systems. There's lots and lots, and we've covered this in some of the previous workshops there as well. Somebody's just mentioned in the chat as well, device blocking the windscreen reduces a good lookout as well. Yeah, some of the more I use an iPad mini myself, other devices are available, but some of the iPads, some of the tablets are actually quite big out there as well, so they can, depending where it is, be problematic in that respect. So here's some practical tips. Yeah, confirm the database currency, review NOTAMs. If you're using multiple devices, check they agree. Sounds common sense, but it's worth doing. Think about device placements. We've already talked about in the situational awareness, but there's one that I just want to touch on, which is treat position uncertainty messages seriously. Emotionally, because the functionality of these devices, the GNSS and the moving maps, is so good, we we get kind of quite emotionally attached to the devices, and there's a kind of a confirmation bias, human factors thing coming in here. We almost, you know, go, oh, well, you know, it's fine. It will come back in a minute or whatever. So if you get uncertainty or integrity devices, you do need to treat those warnings seriously as well. I don't know if many of you out there have done instrument flying or on instrument approaches, but Nigel will ask you whether you've had this in some of your CBIR training there as well. Sometimes you can get integrity messages in various formats come up on the screen as well. And of course, what you should do is go around, discontinue the approach and go and sort it out. But actually, it's quite sometimes an emotional leap to do that. It's quite, and I've seen it with candidates. I've been tempted to do it myself. You're continuing down the approach, you get a warning, and you're like, oh, it'll go off in a minute, or it's just a transient warning, or whatever. Actually, takes quite a leap to say, right, got that, going around. Let's go and sort it out. Nigel, I don't know if you've experienced it in training.
Yeah, definitely. We teach it exactly as you say, because there's a whole raft of other stuff that is as a consequence of the loss of integrity. It means the approach type's going to change. It means all of your calculated minimas are going to change. So just go around. You haven't got time to do all that in the last sort of 600 or 700 feet.
Absolutely. So yeah, so there's some practical things. You might want to use that if you're training threat and error management with your students. Now you're introducing GNSS devices into the training programs, which moves me on nicely to the use of these devices in the PPL, which I'm going to hand over to Nigel for some thoughts on this. Over to you, Nigel.
Okay, Matt. I just want to pick up something that someone said in the chat.
Oh,
A
please
few
do.
people have said in the chat, and that was to say that you mentioned about the movie map devices, or the AIP. These devices get updated a lot more regularly than the chart does. Well, technically, that's not correct, because I don't know whether many people realise that although the chart only comes out once a year, you, as in us, we are supposed to manually update our chart. And there is a place on the NAT's website that gives you the chart updates that you should be applying to your paper chart throughout the year. So it's just the fact that we get lazy and we don't tend not to do that, but technically we should. So actually, the paper chart should get updated in the same way as the movie map stuff, in the same way. But anyway, just a throwaway comment that not many people realise that that's the case. The chart updates are within the year as well, but we have to do it ourselves. Right, so PPL syllabus then. So just out of interest, I'm not sure how many instructors we've got on the call here, but certainly out of interest for those of us that fly, or even just as existing pilots, how it's in the syllabus now, and it's mandated in its own right where moving maps are available. Well, let's face it, most people have got moving maps anyway. So do we think that it's a mandated subject, or is it not? There you go. There's the poll. So if we can have the poll up, please. Thank you very much. So moving maps, as in moving maps, not just GPS stuff, but is a mandated subject in its own right, declared within the PPLA theoretical knowledge syllabus? Is that true, or is that false? What do we think? Okay, it doesn't take long to press one of those buttons. Let's have a look then. And okay, it was well, exactly a 50-50 split there, right? So well done, everybody, for flipping a coin. It's actually true where moving maps are available. So if an organisation has got moving map capability, and let's face it, most of them have these days, then actually it is a requirement to teach that as part of the syllabus. Okay. So let's have a quick look on then. So how we tend to do it is we tend to introduce it gradually for those organisations that have integrated it into the syllabus already. So basically, it's an introduction in the basic in-flight use early. So we don't tell them too much about it, just how to turn it on, how to get an aeroplane on the screen so it plots your position so you know where you are. And then gradually integrates it into the navigation syllabus, but only after a student can implement dead reckoning. In other words, the conventional, way of navigating from, map to ground, ground to map, time and speed, and working out all of those calculations to do with the wind and heading and tracks. Then, once they have mastered that, we start to introduce the moving map system in a little bit more detail, with a long brief on configuration and how to plan using the moving map. And then we start to introduce that into the flight. But equally, as part of the navigation, exercises throughout the course, we always revert back now and again to simulate a device failure, probably at a most inopportune moment, to give people the practice of keeping their dead reckoning skills up to date. So that's basically how it sort of fits in. So the exercises, for those of us that are interested in how they fit in, after you've done your first solo, the next thing we do is we introduce a movie map, and along with a few other bits and pieces, just to keep things moving. Then the exercise 18 is the normal navigation dead reckoning, and then we start introducing the movie map software and use of it, and how to integrate it into the cockpit environment, so that we end up teaching people not to just stare at the magenta line inside the cockpit, as Matt has already said. Okay, so That's about it really for that. So we also need to keep a paper copy of a plog to pick up the pieces when the movie map gives up, so that we know, where we were at a particular place at a particular time, so that we don't end up in a complete loss of situational awareness. And contrary to popular belief, it is perfectly permissible for students to use a movie map to plan and navigate on any of their cross countries, including their qualifying cross country. And it also now forms part of the skills test as well. So where a pilot or a student has been taught how to use a movie map during their training, that will be tested as part of the skills test too. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell as to how we integrate it into the training. So back to Matt now.
Thanks, Nigel. That sort of wraps up the main bit of the thing. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to just address here as well. So, we knew when we talked about this that the internet would explode with people about NOTAM usage and with charts and updating and all the rest of it. So, yes, we're not we're not we get it. Yes, we know. So I think what it's all about is it's about understanding the integrity chain, understanding the data, understanding the threats and errors that could come with that as well. This is what we're trying to get people thinking and talking about here as well. And if anybody thinks, yeah, Matt's just blaring on, giving another party line here as well. Go and ask yourselves, those of you that use popular flight planning devices as well, do you know whether you're getting VFR or IFR NOTAMs? And do you know how to get VFR and IFR NOTAMs as well? Because the last 4 IMC rating candidates that I've tested were all only obtaining and getting VFR NOTAMs, and we're not getting any IFR NOTAMs with a particular device as well. And that's not a criticism of the device, not criticism of the software. It's just because people are not totally familiar with that as well. So there are traps out there, and that's not me talking out of school. It's just a reality there as well. Nigel, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that. Have you come across the VFR, IFR, NOTAM thing as well?
Yeah, and interestingly, the GPS GNSS outages, they do not appear in any of the national databases, which is another good reason to go on the Augur website if you're going to be reliant upon GNSS to do the range checks, because that also lists the NOTAMs for GNSS in particular. Planned outages, that is, yeah.
Brilliant. Right, so we've got a few questions here as well, which I'd like to go into, coming through in a few areas here as well. So the first thing, there's quite a few questions on this, and I'm not ignoring Charlotte, but I'm going to ask Nigel this because of his ground school examiner thing. Nigel, talk to us about whiz wheels and exams and usage in planning and that. What's the SP with that?
So the SP on whiz wheels is you don't actually have to use a whiz wheel. In fact, on a skills test, if you want to plan the flight that I give you or the route, the navigational exercise I give you using a movie map device, that's absolutely fine. You can do that. Okay. However, I will probably ask you a few pertinent questions about where the device got its information from and why it decided to choose the heading that it has for a given route. So I need to know that you understand the principles behind navigation. So, you don't have to use whiz wheels, no, but you certainly do need to know how a device has calculated the necessary navigation parameters. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah. So Charlotte, what do you do in your school in terms of nav planning and that? Do you do it all manually or a mix, or are you finding people starting to use apps and things as well to produce plogs and that?
There's different views. Some people are very keen on still doing it to the traditional way. Obviously, we make sure that everybody knows how to do it that way before they're using the devices. So exactly as Nigel said, so they understand where it all comes from and how it's calculated.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks. Right. So let's pick up some more questions. So I'm just looking between the two, and some of the questions are quite similar. So I'm going to try and collate them now as well. Solar storms. Oof. How do solar storms affect GPS? Is it obvious? Nigel, I've not got too much experience in this. I know there is some effects, but is it obvious? I'm not entirely
Uh,
sure.
I don't know is the honest answer, and I'm not going to baffle anyone to say that I do know, but I'm sure along the lines of you that it will have an effect on various navigational capabilities, but as well as a lot of other places as well. But I don't know. Yeah, treat with caution.
Yeah. So yeah, we will do some digging into that as well. Um, yeah, and somebody said it isn't there, unpredictable and can affect dilution of precision. That's an interesting terminology there as well. Right. Yeah, some people are talking about devices reverting to planning mode if the connection's lost. So I think that's going from an in-flight flight mode. If they lose a connection, they may revert to a planning mode as well. Yep, I've certainly had it as well. Where if you're using connections to other devices, and this isn't the EC devices issue. So Apple iPads, for example, are very clever and will try and hop around Wi-Fi connections if they think there's a better, more capable Wi-Fi connection. So I've had it actually taxiing past known Wi-Fi connections like the Clubhouse, but my iPad has disconnected from my connection to the GNSS device and reconnected itself to the club Wi-Fi because the Apple iPad goes, oh, there's a better, stronger internet connection there. I'll go to that one. So yeah, that's thinks that. So and somebody's put lithium battery fireproof bag. Yep. There has been some debate on that. And I think Charlotte, Nigel, I think when we discussed this in the pre-brief, we came to the conclusion that out the window is probably better. I don't know whether either of your schools has thought about this with lithium battery devices.
If you can touch it, get out, get rid of it. Yeah.
There as well. Right. There's a few questions as well about if the device fails and backups there as well. So some people are talking about radio navigation aids. Some people are talking about getting heading advice from air traffic and things like that. So, I mean, Nigel, how much of um, an urgency situation do you think a a GNSS failure or loss of GNSS device is? What is this
Well,
something we should be treating as an urgency problem, or should it just be we'll just go on to my
Well,
backup?
in theory, as we've been saying throughout the evening, even from the pre-planning stage, the pre-flight plan, you should be anticipating a failure. So you should have a process in place that allows you to carry on with conventional navigation. Now, whether that be by, radio navigation aids, which are few and far between these days and getting even more sparse as we know, or whether that be by, conventional dead reckoning, then, I think you'd be expected to to carry on the navigation by some other means. However, that doesn't mean to say that if you feel that you have lost situational awareness, and especially as we all know and love the UK airspace where you can't go for more than 5 minutes without bumping into a piece of airspace, then yeah, if you have an issue, then get help. Yeah. And there are lots, and get help from a person that is going to be able to give you assistance. Don't speak to the nearest air ground, station with some little airfield that operates. They're not going to be able to help you at all. So find a radar unit or a large unit, or if all else fails and you really are in a situation where you're just not sure where you are, then 1 to 1.5 and get found pretty quickly. But I think in general, you should plan so that you are still able to navigate with the loss of the device. Yes.
Yeah, great stuff. And Charlotte, I don't know what I mean, there's a lot of commenters in the chat as well about the loss of traditional radio navigation aids. Is that something you're seeing down in the south where you instruct an operator? Are you losing that ability to exploit traditional radio navigation aids?
Yeah, as Nigel said, they are gradually disappearing. We're quite lucky. We've got a few close to us, so it's there are options available. But yeah, I think as we've said earlier, it's reverting to that dead reckoning. If you've got that backup ready, then you should be able to switch to it if you need to. So it's just making sure you've thought about that in your planning and you're prepared to switch back to whatever that
Well,
backup is.
thanks. And one of the final questions we'll look to take here is GPS moving map implementation into the skills test. So there's a few different ones: PPL, MPPL, skills test. So the initial license skills test, but there's also you can have skills tests for class ratings, for example, there as well. So there is a training com on this. A training com is available to everybody, and we'll send out a link in the post email event. So the CAA have explained for helicopters and for aeroplanes how they recommend the device, if required or if desired by the candidate, is integrated into flight. But effectively, what you're looking at doing is departing using GNSS, and using that aid. At some point during the navigation phase, failure of the GNSS aid will be simulated. So it might be denied by the examiner by just turning it off, or losing that screen or on the iPad to simulate an overheat or a loss of GPS signal, and the candidate will be expected to continue round the next bit of the route using dead reckoning techniques and using their plan. For the diversion, the examiner may introduce this in a number of scenarios, but effectively the examiners, the CA, recommend that the examiner sees an ability of the candidate to perform some kind of unplanned leg using a dead reckoning way. So, in terms of, we need to go from here to here as an unplanned leg to diversion. What we're looking for is that the candidate can get, a rough heading and figure out what the wind is going to do to that heading, that track, and go, well, I'm going to correct this and it's going to take about this long. So a rough kind of approximation, and then the device can be restored and then to perform the diversion and back up those kind of initial thoughts and calculations. So the skills test basically is looking to assure competence in dead reckoning, but also we're now bringing in the ability to exploit GNSS capabilities and use those GNSS capabilities appropriately as well. So, for example, if you are going heads down, if your lookout is degraded, you can expect the examiner to comment and observe on that accordingly. Nigel, how many tests have you done using GNSS? Have you got much experience of it yet?
Interestingly, I've done about three or four, and we always give people the option to use it. Okay, at the moment, and it's probably about a 50% take up rate, probably because people aren't quite confident enough in it, which reflects back to the fact that maybe we need to look at the training a little bit more, to make them more confident before they go for the skills test. Yeah.
So what we're not seeing yet is we're not seeing really yet, because it's only all came in on the 1st of October, and the PPL test forms, they changed earlier this week as well. And we're not really seeing candidates that have been all the way through in the kind of the new regime yet. I think that's the thing there as well. But I think this is a great move. All of us in industry have been pushing for it for a long time. So it's great that the CA have responded to this and changes. And I don't think test or examine EASA as well, but I don't think EASA have made these changes yet, Nigel, have they? I think this is a UK move.
It's a UK only one at the moment. I'm told they're thinking about it along a similar set of lines, but it's not yet in their regulations, no.
Great. And, IMC rating tests, class rating tests as well. Yeah, we are expecting to see exploitation of moving map devices for those as well. But again, the examiner will be looking that, the device is up to date, it's mounted properly, and that the candidate is using it and exploiting it in a proper manner. But the only comment I would make finally on this as well is that your instructors and examiners and your schools should be supporting you and supporting the exploitation of this as well. If you've got examiners that are dismissive of this technology or are trying to restrict you using this technology in the test in an appropriate way, that is an issue. And that should be raised through your head of training or the CAA flights ops and training inspectors as well. Yeah, so examiners should not be putting personal choices on this, either trying to force you to use something that is optional or not allowing you to use something which is permitted. So that's the only comment I'll close on with that. Nigel, just before we close, last few minutes, is there any other, or Charlotte, is there any other interesting questions or comments you'd just like to pull upon?
Unless you want to mention SBAS and EGNOS and Brexit.
Yeah, let's do that as a final thought without getting political, Nigel. Yeah.
Without getting political, yeah. So as we all know that the SBAS system, which is everyone technically knows it, well, everyone probably knows it as WAS, which is the American version of satellite-based augmentation system, which is basically a way of enhancing the accuracy of the GNSS signals from a stationary satellite. Now, obviously, in Europe, that is the system concerned is called EGNOS. The Galileo is the constellation of satellites in Europe, and the EGNOS system is the one that gives us more accuracy. But since the UK left Brexit, they withdrew the license to use parts of the EGNOS system. Now that's important because EGNOS comes in different flavors. There's an open service, which is free for anybody to use. Then there's something called a safety of life service, which is the one that allows a high degree of accuracy, which is what the approach or the LPV particularly approach RMPs use. So that's why there are no LPV approaches in the UK, because the only way you could use that is using the safety of life service from EGNOS, which the UK is no longer licensed to do. There's also another layer of service which is still available if people want to pay for it, and that's what the farmers use to do their high accuracy, combine harvesting on automation or autopilot, effectively for a combine harvester. So it's affected some of the capabilities to do, particularly with RMP approaches, but not all RMP approaches. So it's not that we can't use it at all. It's certainly it has disabled us from being able to use LPVs in the UK. But generally speaking, that's one of the mechanisms used to, as I say, enhance the accuracy of the GNSS signals, satellite signals, to give us a little bit more accuracy than if we just use those satellites alone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nigel. Love to get into some of the more technical questions. I was just going to say as well, we had some very, very technically detailed questions sent to us on the email. We're going to investigate those. They were just too deep. It was going into aircraft certification standards and that as well. So some of the stuff was a little bit out of the scope of this, but we are taking it. We are looking at it. We're going to feed back to the regulator. We might need to go to some of the airworthiness parts of the CAA that we don't normally work with. We normally work with the GA unit and the flight ops side of things. But we have got those questions. If you're sitting there thinking they didn't address my question, we've got them, but we, like I say, need to feed back to certain areas of the CAA. Final thought from me, just to round up everything we've said. The development of these capabilities in the last few years even in GA flying has been revolutionary. You know, it's come on leaps the information, the capability available to private pilots and GA pilots is just amazing. These are absolutely how it is game changing, to use the cliche there as well. So this is absolutely brilliant stuff. It really is. More we can exploit it, the more we can bring it into our everyday flying, the better, because it's going to be good for all of us there as well. But as we're doing that, if we can do it in an aware and risk aware as opposed to a risk averse manner, that's the way ahead. So yeah. What we recommend: risk aware, not risk averse, when we're talking about GNSS. Somebody's also put about acronyms there as well. Yeah, it's very difficult, some of these, to talk all of these out as well. So we are aware of it. It's something we did discuss in the prep as well, but with a lot of information to get across here as well, trying to spell everything out would be very clunky. But yeah, I take the point. Thank you. Finally, there we go. There's some of our socials, some of our links there as well. Hope you've been able to take something away. Thanks as ever for all your engagement there as well. You will get a survey up in the window. Please do fill that in, because we take information from that as to what's worrying you, what you want to hear about, what's interesting to people. And a lot of the webinars that we're doing and the ones we've got next year are all based on the feedback you've given us about things you want to engage and you want to hear about. So please do take the time to fill that in as well. You'll get a post-event email with this as well that will have a link to the replay, so you can go back and look at any aspects that interest you. And all of the links that have been dropped in the chat will be in that email as well. So don't worry about having to copy and paste them or take them down there as well. They'll all be coming into the that post-event email as well. But we've run out of time, so I'd love to go into this in more depth, but we keep this to the time. Nigel, Charlotte, thanks for joining us. Thanks. We've had Maddie and Sophie keeping us going with the tech in the background there as well. And thank you to all of you for your engagement, your great questions, and your great input to the chat. That's really what makes it an interesting and engaging evening for all of us. So thanks once again. If you see us around the bazaars, do come and say hello. Do come and chat to us. It's really nice when people come up to me and chat face to face as well. So other than that, wish you all a safe winter flying season. Take care out there, and hopefully see you at some future webinars. Thank you very much all. Take care.